On the podcast this week, I've got Trevor Sumption, the owner of Fishhawk Electronics. You know, Fishhawk has a lot of unique tools that people don't really understand what they do, and Trevor's going to explain what they do, how they came to be, and what they're going to do to put more fish in the boat for you like they do me. The Bigwater Podcast. I'm Robertson. You know, you find us at bigwaterfishing.com, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, all that stuff, hopefully everywhere but the jailhouse. That's our line for 2021. And do things a little different. We've got the producer man. You guys have seen him with me for a long time. And producer dude, what do you think?
I want to point something out today, and I want to show everybody. So everybody that is listening online, you got to go over to YouTube. Okay, you can watch these podcasts on YouTube, but I'm going to show you some intense planning. Okay, so
I don't like where this is going.
So Ross and I did not coordinate this as much, but we are wearing the same sweatshirt today. So I just wanted to point that out today as we get started.
That's cute. Fish USA, thank you.
Yes.
I thought that was going to be a lot worse, to be perfectly honest.
I couldn't think of anywhere else to go with it,
okay,
but that was good. So how do you find Bigwater Fishing?
Bigwater Fishing?
Yeah.
Bigwaterfishing.com, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. I mean, I've told them how many times. Were they not listening?
Yeah.
Everywhere.
That is true. And also, and I said it at the beginning, and this is something you never do, remind your listeners, because remember, we have listeners all over the world on Stitcher, on Google Podcasts, on Apple, and on Spotify, that the video is available. Where can you find that?
That's on YouTube.
All right.
The Bigwater Fishing. Producer dude is here. He's not just an ugly face.
No, we're not joking around.
But I do always forget because I don't listen to the download.
You don't listen to yourself?
I try not to.
I would think you would be watching yourself 24 hours a day.
I try to get the pain over with as much as possible.
So who do we have today?
We have Trevor Sumption. I mean, I've been calling him Salt and Pepper for a while because he's definitely getting a lot more salt and pepper, and he just rolls his eyes every time. But he is the owner of Fishhawk Electronics. And I'll tell you, when I pull into a gas station, which I do quite literally every day, there's two things that people always say when they see my boat in there, or at least things that are, you know, out of the normal. And it's like, what is that thing on the back of your boat? And they usually are meaning the Minn Kota Talon, because a lot of people are, and I've got the 15-foot model. But the other one, without a doubt, is what is a Fishhawk? They see the decal, they see that unit hanging on there. I don't take it out of the boat. And as many videos as we've done, I still think that there's education to be done because people don't understand what a game-changer piece of equipment it is. So we're going to be talking with Trevor about that and how we kind of done some development on things, the need, and just also some just hijinks screwing around. Because as I sit here and look at this billboard on the back, I mean, obviously you're not very technical. I hope that I'm glad that the Fishhawk technology is better and you're not completely involved because it's backwards. But what is this? A Fishhawk with a
I learned two things, well, three things maybe. So obviously, yes, my art skills aren't supreme. So that was didn't learn it, just a reminder. Second was it's hard to write backwards, right? Okay. And third was it's very difficult to draw a fishhawk probe without making it look like a spaceship or something way worse. So those are the three things I learned in my art experiment for the day.
Well, I'm all for your art. I think it was fantastic. Just letting you know.
Is that the rod going through the boat, or did you just cross me out?
It's like the line. So it was. I mean, you probably can't see it's supposed to be a walleye. It's green, right? You know, so it's kind of like the walleye. You know, you're the big walleye god. You know, whatever. So he doesn't. You know, the line through your name. Then we got the Fishhawk probe there. So it just, it just kind of sets the stage for what we're talking about. So with that, I'll kind of like readjust my camera now so you can actually, see me better than my artwork. So
So, I mean, I don't. I like the background on stuff. We don't get too deep into it. I think people like the meat and the potatoes of it. But I met you while fishing with Chip Cartwright on Lake Michigan.
Yeah, right.
And it's just funny, the fishing industry, how many guys we've had on here, and just how small of a world it is. And you used to work with a rep group, and I knew those guys and kind of did some work with them, and still know a lot of those guys today. And it's a big little industry, or little big industry, depending on the day, right? And
nobody goes away, even if they should. So it's one of those. Yeah.
Well said. But the funny, I tell this story, and maybe you got a different angle on it. I'm sure a little bit different, but it's not really knocking either one of us. I think it's kind of funny. But I wrote a book, which, God, it's been almost 8, 9, 10 years ago, probably now.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. I don't know exactly. Don't quote me, but I just remember. And while I knew you, we had fished together a couple times or whatever, but nothing. You lived in Minnesota. I'm down here in Ohio, and we caught up in the summertime here and there. See each other once in a while at shows or what have you. But I remember getting a phone call from you and saying, "Hey, Paige," and I'm making this up too because I don't remember what it is, but page 67, really, dude? Do you remember this?
Right. Yeah.
And I'm
I do.
And I
Yeah,
go, "What is that?" And you're like, "In your book, page 67." And I'm like, "Okay." And I'm like literally going and grabbing it and looking at it, and I'm like, "Oh yeah." So just totally by accident, in the background, there was a Fishhawk in there. And for people at home, it was the X4, which is like made for a salmon boat or a permanent mount deal. And I cut, wired, spliced, made a mount, did a whole bunch of stuff to try to make that unit more portable for what I do. And because also, I fish in multiple boats, and I bought that thing. Like there was no sponsorship or anything. Like I was using a Fishhawk because I understood, the advantage of that, having salmon fished and elsewhere. But you, in so many words, were kind of like, "Dude, could you just not use my unit?" And what turned off is kind of I don't know what your intention was, but it wasn't really maybe to bust my balls a little bit, but also knowing you the way I do now is probably to figure out, like, why did you have to do that? And right, like, you're kind of like, do you really need to tell my customers, like, seriously? But at the same point, I don't want to put words in your mouth. You tell me where you're at if you remember that conversation, because it's been probably 10 years ago.
Yeah, well, I remember we were fishing with Chip that morning, and obviously, that's kind of our whole, historical market is the salmon business and everything there, and so I remember, we were, using a Fishhawk together then at that point, but then, it just kind of, when I saw, what you were, kind of your hack for it, basically, it kind of, got me thinking more about something that we had always, talked about doing is, how do we make a unit more portable, and how do we make it fit on a number of different boats, and then also what are the applications outside of the cold water salmon market. So it was kind of like all these things came together at once, because the other thing that we were hearing, and I think it's, I know that you spend most of your time in the Central Basin, but the other thing that was kind of going on in the background at the same time was we were all of a sudden selling a lot of product over in the Eastern Basin. And, obviously deeper water, most of those guys are fishing downriggers. A lot of those guys jump back and forth between Lake Ontario, Lake Erie, so we were getting that feedback. So it's just, as often is the case, it was like the stars were just kind of starting to align a little bit, where it's like, hey, well, we know this works in this market, what about, it seemed like the natural next step was to make it work in the walleye fishery. And like I say, things like leg cord taking over some of the other markets, things like that are super speed sensitive, where we knew how that was all going to play together. And then, we see what you're doing, or I see what you're doing, and it's like, okay, well, how can we refine this a little bit so, every boat, it doesn't look like one of Ross's hacks on it. So.
Yeah, because breaking it down, there was several things that were in there that are now a finished, polished product. But
yeah, you had like you had like hose clamps and so yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's funny because you look back at some of the old like Linder stuff or the old Roach. Those guys kind of taught me a lot. And you look at some of the things that they did. I mean, Gary Roach had the water pickup system that we now use, the freshwater pickup system with PVC pipes and hose clamps on the back of his Lund. And obviously, to credit to you, because again, before we had a real business relationship, you don't know how somebody's going to work with these things. Because I'll be honest, I've been around companies, and fortunately, I've never had to work with any, but where guys just do things and they just want to see how fast they can get something to market. It doesn't matter if it doesn't work; they just figure, we'll come out with 2.0. And it took us. I mean, you probably know exactly, but I want to say we were about 2 years. Two and a half?
Probably closer to 3. I mean, a 2-year statement about the 2.0 kind of approach on how companies do things. I've been in the industry long enough that I've gone through those personally, and it's not fun. I mean, so, kind of in the formative years type thing, it's like, we don't ever want to build something, on that basis, because that's a painful process. And we value our customers a lot more than that, to use them as guinea pigs, where if we're going to do a project, the project's going to be ready when the project's ready. And sometimes that's on schedule, but if I guess the last year has taught us anything, is that you better expect the unexpected, and product development is no different. So yeah, it was it was more than 24 months. I know that. So, and it continues. I mean, it never really stops, to be honest. So.
Now, Ross, I know you get excited when we talk about fishing stuff, all right? But we've left out a major thing so far. What the heck is a fishhawk? We haven't even talked about what it does. Yeah. That's a good point, Trevor, don't you think? Ross and his professional podcast just omitted all of that.
I like having producer guy here, because I feel like this is more of a mediation session than a podcast.
Right? So we need mediators.
Yeah, I know. It's good.
So let's back up.
So yeah, I have the guy here, so I'm not gonna tell. I have told everybody what I think. So tell us what tell us and show us. Tell us what a fishhawk is, and then tell us why I need it every day.
So we'll take a high altitude approach here. So without getting into specifics as far as models and things like that, because it's actually a pretty streamlined product line. There's we don't have a ton of models or anything like that. But what Fishhawk is, I do have a probe here on the table. But what Fishhawk is this is the probe. This is what goes underwater, and what we're doing is we're sending water temperature and speed from this probe wirelessly via a sonar signal back to the boat, which then reads out on a display. So not only, obviously everybody has, speed over ground off their GPS on top, and they have surface temperature on top. What we're doing is actually providing the data from depth. So presumably the depth that you're fishing, we're providing that information, wirelessly back to the boat from what's happening, 20, 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 feet underneath the surface of the water. So that's in the high altitude view. That's what the Fishhawk does. So, the second part of that, why do I need that? Well, when we start talking about current, like you have on Lake Erie, like we have on all the Great Lakes or any, big body of water, when we start talking about currents at depth, so let's say we're trolling one direction and we're trolling with a 2 mile an hour current. So even though, your speed over ground on your GPS is telling you you're traveling 2 miles an hour, if we're traveling with basically a current that's pushing us, or that's pushing the lure at depth, also 2 miles an hour, your bait is actually sitting dead in the water and you don't know it. And that's what the Fishhawk does. The opposite's also true. If we're trolling into a 2 mile an hour current, now all of a sudden our bait is burning out at 4 miles an hour, and we don't know it. So those are, I would say 2 miles an hour is a fairly extreme example. I'm just using that for a point, but What we're doing is we're trying to give you the information at the depth that you're actually fishing at, rather than just relying on surface information. And you can probably share more of the anecdotes on, what you see out there on the water every day. But I think it's fair to say that there's days when a tenth of a mile an hour will make a big difference in what your box is going to be, the fish that you're putting in the boat. So there's that part of it. And then also, I'll throw it out here and we can circle back to it. But what we really do, we provide that information. But what we really do is we provide you repeatability. So if you know that you caught a fish and you were down, the probe's down 50 feet, and you caught a fish and it says 1.8 on the display, well, the fish just kind of told you what they want. I mean, even you can figure out that you just want to repeat it, right? So
it's offensive but accurate.
Yeah. So I was, yeah.
Well, I mean, even
so is that a producer, man? Is that a good high level?
Yeah, that's good. And then I'll continue as host, and we'll just continue, because since someone can't seem to ask relevant questions.
Just so you know, he has a radio face and he's got a print magazine voice. But at any rate, other than that, honestly, I'm probably going to take a little shit from you here on this one. But we were out yesterday filming an episode, and middle of the winter, we just had a weather day break, and we said, hey, let's go. And my boat and everything has already been gone, so we kind of literally just borrowed a deal. I literally threw just the rods that were on deck. I threw life jackets in the rod locker, one of them deals, and I didn't have the Fishhawk with me. I had literally 4 or 5 boxes of crankbaits. That's it. And we came down and we just smoked them. We marked them. We came through a pass, and we had maybe like a 1 foot chop, and maybe not even that. And the wind was starting to switch, and I could kind of feel the current again. I'm pretty good at reading current, but the reality is you don't ever know. Like, you can say you're good at it, but that doesn't mean changing from second to second. So the advantage of the Fishhawk is, even if you've got as much experience as you think you do, you probably don't. And being able to look down, just as easy as saying, hey, do I want to use the sundial to tell what time it is, or do I want to look at my watch? And to me, that's the difference with the Fishhawk. But long and the short of it is, literally yesterday, I did not have my Fishhawk. I didn't have hardly anything with me. We had flares in there, and that was about it. So we come down, and we're getting ready to spin, and we kind of quit catching them. Now, granted, we got out of the fish a little bit. And I looked down, and I decided to speed it up, because here I am switching back. I felt the current, again, using my stuff. Pretty good at that whole deal. And the guy with me, Old Country Steve, if you've watched any of that shenanigans, he goes, dude, we're doing 1.7. We're catching at 1.4. What are you doing? And I'm like, and this is a guy who's an accomplished fisherman. He could catch a fish in his pocket. And I'm like, yeah, but we quit catching them. And the current here is you could watch, just little things, but that's a whole story for another day. Soon as I went to one, I almost didn't get out of my mouth. I think we have this on video. We haven't even watched it yet. Boom, we start catching again. So it was that 3/10, like to your point, of getting us to doing actually what we were doing before. So if I would have been doing that 1.4, we would be barely moving one. The baits have a totally different action. They don't rattle the same. Boom, you're not catching them. And ultimately, the current and everything was jacked up enough. And because I didn't have the Fishhawk, I told him, I'm like, pick them up. We picked the lines up. We went back and we came downwind, which took a lot of time. It took a lot of time out of the day. But when we did, we immediately went back to triples and quads. And it was like, hey, that bite could have been over with. People could have seen us. So something as little as, I can't even say it's little, but people think it's a little deal, makes a huge difference in my fishing. Like, literally 200 days in the boat this year, I had the Fishhawk with me. The one day I don't, I'm like, shit.
He did mention it, though. He did say he wished he had it. I will go on record saying he said that.
Yeah, from a sponsor standpoint, I would certainly hope so. No, but I mean, it is. It's one of the little. There's so much fishing knowledge out there now, and there's so many different ways to get it. That we feel the same way. That this is one of those details that maybe has not gotten the play in the past, and we've seen it. We've seen it organically, because now, like I said, we're pretty well known in like the Great Lakes salmon fishery. People, it's a pretty widely recognized brand there. But now we're hearing that from Great Lakes walleye anglers too, and that was really the goal. And when we kind of set out to, really formalize what you had been doing and turn that into something that was actually designed to do what it does, we're feeling, like I say, that's that's something that's happening naturally because people do figure it out. And usually what it takes is, an experience like you had yesterday, and you're in the boat with somebody and maybe they have it or they've used it or something like that. And then once you see that firsthand, the light bulb kind of comes on and it's like, well, yeah, this makes sense. It's not rocket science, and there's no magic numbers or anything like that. It's really about finding out what works and then having a way to repeat it. That's really what it is. And you can see it like, you go out at like popular salmon ports, you can see the boats that have some kind of speed and temp on them versus the boats that don't, because the ones that do, they can go through fish and they can turn around and they can still catch them. The ones that don't will do what you did. They'll pick up and then they'll run back up and make the same troll, because direction control can make makes a big difference on a lot of days, regardless of the species. So, that's why. I mean, the speed is what's making that, a factor.
The thing that still kind of surprises me, to be honest, and I know when we're talking like full-time charter guys, it's one thing, but to me, still, locally on Lake Erie, obviously a lot of people come here from other places to fish. Guys don't hesitate to go buy a $20 custom painted crankbait that they're never going to probably catch them on again. And it was the only reason that worked that day is because they could have bit on probably anything, if truth be known, or anything would have bit that hour. But yet they won't put in that investment. Same thing with like landing nets. I'm always surprised at how shitty of landing nets guys use. Like they got a $100,000 boat.
See, I get it. Yeah, right.
You know where I'm going with that? And
no, I do.
But yet you don't sponsor many guys. I don't know how many you even do. Not many.
Not many, no.
And there's a lot of big name guys using this. Now, maybe because you don't sponsor, or maybe because they don't want to let people know because they haven't taken the, I'm more of an education thing. We're an open book. You watch our YouTube stuff, there's no secrets. Yeah. Now, guys that are making money tournaments fishing or doing other things, or because they bought it, they don't want to tell you. I can tell you there's an awful lot of big name guys that are using, especially now with that X2, which is what we developed, the more portable, where you don't have to have a downrigger, or you can take it from boat to boat. It's pretty much.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my kind of view of how we work with pro staff and everything, the pro staff, I mean, again, going back to, what you said about education, the people that we work with the closest are people that, they bought the product on their own once upon a time, and they were already users. It wasn't like we're paying somebody to use something. The people that we do work with, in a business relationship, they came to us and said, hey, I'm already using it. So it's not really like we're sponsoring people to go out and use a product. What we look for is people that are willing to educate, the brand aside, Fishhawk aside, what we're really promoting is why speed and temperature even matters. I mean, so it's back to that kind of high altitude thing. We're confident that if people understand what that can do for them as far as anglers, we're confident that, we're going to get our fair share of whatever that is of that market. So it's really just kind of teaching people about why this is important in the first place.
When you talk about, like, a good example is a crankbait that we use a lot out here in Lake Erie. If you're not doing 1.3 miles an hour, and I've learned this from snorkeling in a swimming pool with it, if you're not doing 1.3 miles an hour, the rattle doesn't rattle. You barely faintly hear it because of the movement it takes in order for those things to smash against each other. So again, I don't know how many times, I mean, this is information I don't even like maybe people to have, that I fish against, but I know that tenth or two means that rattle's moving or not moving. So maybe 0.2 overall in speed doesn't matter at certain times a year because it's not going to affect the depth or all these things when you're at a certain range. But if that rattle isn't going, now it totally changed my presentation. And I think there's a lot of baits that are like that certain baits have certain effective speed ranges, whether it's too fast or too slow.
Yeah, I've never thought of that actually, as far as like the sound of the baits. I think that, here's the other thing. It's like, there's days it's not going to matter, right? I mean, and on those days, you're way more dialed in on this than I am, but on those days, wouldn't you just want to go as fast as you possibly can, just to cover the most amount of water? I mean, that kind of stands to reason. So it's not, you know, we have to be kind of like transparent about that. There are days where it's not going to matter. It's the days that it does matter is when that's where that can be the difference, and those days there's more of those days than there are suicide days where you can fish stupid and just catch them. Now, I think it's going to be really interesting in the next few years because of where you are and what your lake is doing. I mean, pretty safe to say that if you can't go out and catch a bunch of fish on Lake Erie right now, that you're definitely doing something wrong. Okay. You guys are going to have a phenomenal fishery in place for the next decade at probably a bare minimum. So I think that is going to be interesting to see how that plays out a little bit, because I think really what you're going to, what we'll see as far as why would somebody want to buy a Fishhawk to fish on Lake Erie, if I can catch them all the time. Well, like I say, every day isn't going to be like that. And I also think that, that people that are looking for maybe that better class of fish or things like that, I think that's what I think that's what it's going to come down to in a lot of cases. And we've talked about speed basically the whole time today. I think we'll learn a lot more about temperature. We've seen some really cool things, studies that have shown, what the walleyes do, and as far as how they relate to temperature and how they, basically different size classes, group together and what they do, with water temperature. So I don't think it's going to be as critical as it is in our cold water markets, like the, trout and salmon markets. But it is pretty interesting that there's a lot of that information is coming out now. So.
Fishing is a humbling sport. I don't care how good you think you're at it. I don't care how long you've been doing it. Fishing is a humbling thing. And there's an outdoor writer by the name of Steve Pollock that we've had on the podcast, and he's written about me for a long time, and I really value his opinion. He always has these sayings, that come out of nowhere, the old fart sayings, right? And one of them he always says is a compliment to me, or he says, "Son, you're not a broken clock fisherman." 20 years ago, I was kind of like, what? And, simply put, he's like, hey, broken clock is right twice a day. And with fishing, there are periods, like ice fishing in particular, that you can do about whatever you want at maybe in the morning or in the afternoon at a certain amount of time. And I think that's the same kind of way with the Fishhawk. There are times, you can say, I don't need it for anything. Forget just a Fishhawk. But if you want to be a broken clock fisherman, you're going to have a lot of time where you ain't doing real good.
Well, for Ross Robertson to say that fishing is a humbling game, that's a pretty profound state, like borderline oxymoron. it's like that's a profound thing. I'm going to make sure that we catalog this interview.
Ask Tiger Woods. Golf is humbling too, but I think his might have been a little different situation.
Look how well that ended up. So.
Well, he's still got millions of dollars, but he might have had
some. Yeah, mad skills. No question.
He might have had some outside influences there. It might have been.
Maybe, yeah.
I don't know. So, where do you think? I don't know how much I can say or what you want to talk about, but you're always evolving things. Even some of the other products you have, I've used. I know before, like our relationship, where you've got that little clip-on temp deal.
The CD, yep.
I don't know the names on all those things, but I just know it works. I know it's real good for that. Finding those pockets and stuff. But where do you see, electronics, like we've had podcasts talking about this, like when Humminbird had Lake Master come out, it was a game changer. Like it was so accurate. And then when they had side imaging come out, you're like, oh my God. And then down imaging really helped me with identification of, individual species of bait fish and things. Like that's kind of what I still use it for, just the way that I fish. And now we've got, 360, which is insane. Just insane. Not as much for trolling applications, but for casting stuff or ice fishing, it's just mega 360 is nuts. And now we're looking at, most of the guys are having a mega live. They're having some type of live sonar, which is totally changing the game. Do you think that, where can we go in some of the other stuff? Maybe even if it's not a Fishhawk temp probe deal? Do you?
Yeah, I think the Mega Live concept, the product that's out there now. I think you will see that in a trolling application. I think that's in my mind that's a foregone conclusion. So I think you will see that, and I think that will be most likely is going to be the next big thing that's going to be that people are going to really take a look at that they don't have now. as far as, how that relates to what we do in Fishhawk, I mean, it's honestly, I mean, for us as a small independent company, I mean, what allows us to be successful is to be hyper focused. So that's really what we want to do what we do now and do it better is what we want to do. So we know everything that we've got, in the development pipeline right now is a direct result of what we see in the field. What are the problems? What are the, so like, as far as our development goes, I can say that we're not going to reinvent our wheel. We're just going to make our wheel, maybe we'll make it meaner, we'll put like some cool rims and then like big tires on it or something like that. So, but it's going to
wow.
Outside, I know you're that guy. I mean,
he's got spinners on his Suburban. He's got spinners on his Suburban with the glow light underneath.
He's got them on his boat, for God's sakes. I mean, come on.
Not to any of you. I drive a truck. I'm just a good old working boy. God.
But rather than just make them look pretty, we will make them work better in the process. But everything that we're doing, specific to our own development, like I say, it's just a matter of how can we do what we do and do it better and just be the best at what our small little niche is. But you're going to see, I mean, as far as, the big sonar technology, that kind of stuff, I mean, there's definitely things coming that I think will play. They haven't played maybe in the trolling market yet, but I'm very confident that they will. I mean, I do know people that are using similar products in the salmon fisheries and things like that, and I've seen some pretty cool stuff, and I think that that's going to be in our market sooner than later. So.
Well, yeah, it just seems like, talking with electronics and stuff like that, everybody keeps waiting for like wireless. Like I rig a boat every year. It's a pain in the ass. Mm-hmm. Or if you have something break, like that, some of the transducers are going to become more wireless. And it's kind of like the X2. Kind of that was one phase.
Kind of, yeah.
But when you look at the Fishhawk stuff, correct me when I'm wrong here, integrates with Canon downriggers and Humminbird.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And so, some more of that integration. I mean, Humminbird, I work with Humminbird and Minn Kota, and they have that one boat network.
Network, yeah.
And you've got your trolling motor, you got your Talon shallow water anchor, you got your graphs, your downriggers. They all work together.
Right. And I think that's 100% the integration, whether it's wireless or not. There's actually a lot of intellectual property around the whole wireless communication thing. So there's a whole kind of, field of landmines that, the companies have to, kind of navigate, in that. But regardless of how they're doing it, the integration part, the whole kind of the collabs, like we did with Johnson Outdoors with the Canon product, the Humminbird product, you're going to see, you unquestionably see more of that because, and that's not us sitting here doing that. That's, consumers are asking for that. I mean, so the project that you mentioned where we can communicate with the new Canon downriggers, which then communicate with the Humminbird units. I mean, customers have asked us for that for the last 10 years. We can't do it on our own, however. So when that all kind of came to fruition, that's how that happens is when consumers ask for something for long enough, you better be listening and be able to deliver. I mean, and that product has gone very, very well for them, and it certainly helped us in the process. So. You look at like Outdoor Life and Field and Stream, their magazine, their subscription base, has been getting older and older, and the younger aren't coming in. They're obviously doing digital. Kind of the same thing with fishing a little bit. Are you worried, as just a fisherman or also as a business owner, that this millennial crowd or this younger crowd either aren't getting into fishing or they're not doing what we're doing? I think it's different now because I think there's, I'm so skewed on it because, living in Minnesota or northern Minnesota specifically, I mean, there's such a huge per capita. There's so many people here that fish that we don't really, we don't see that every day like a lot of other states do or things like that. So I'm a little skewed. I'm a little maybe skewed one way on that, but I think that like what we're seeing with the high school fishing and college fishing and things like that, I think for me personally, like for what we do as our business, I'm actually pretty optimistic about it because these are people that are, very vested in the activity and the sport. And those are tomorrow's customers type thing. So I think you can have the kind of debate on, how that all plays out as far as, is that a good thing or a bad thing or whatever. But I think in the long term, I think it's a good thing because I think the anglers that are coming up right now are much smarter anglers, than maybe what we've seen in the past. They're more educated. And we've got, all of the podcasts in the world and YouTube and everything else to, that learning curve has, even in our lifetimes, has been cut dramatically. I mean, and really, you look at what's happened in the last 5 years. I mean, that's really what, social, whether it's social or just information sharing, that's really what's, probably been the biggest story in fishing is how much more information we have available to us now than we had, 5 or 10 or certainly 20 and 30 years ago. So.
Well, it's like, ice fishing. Like I always tell people when they haven't done it or done it like what we do and using electronics. I mean, I'm talking just even old school flashers, and I tell them it's like, adult video gaming because you're watching the fish. It's in real time. This is the fish, this is the lure.
Yeah.
And just the other day, a good friend of mine, he was really excited because his son's showing more interest in fishing. Like they didn't have school all the time, right? Yeah. So they're doing this and they're going out with them. But the thing that he believes is because he was doing the live sonar and, the kid was more engaged. I've had people in my boat were catching them nonstop, but unless we're literally like bluegill fishing, catching them nonstop, like nonstop, they lose interest, they fall asleep on the deck. And do you think that some of the technology, like, that live imagery long-term can help the younger crowd maybe stay more engaged?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I saw that. I had that with my 12-year-old last weekend. I mean, he's not a super avid fisherman. But, same thing. We were ice fishing and he was engaged, because he was interacting with the fish on the sonar, so, that's an unquestionable there's an unquestionable draw to that, and it's pretty cool stuff. It's when I see it and say, I've kind of been around it, basically as a kid and my entire adult life. But when I see stuff and I'm like, wow. I think that kind of says something.
I think you'd be better at it as long as you've been doing it.
Yeah, I don't even have a comeback to that because I think you're right. I think it's time. Not all of us get to go out and have a captain schedule, and some of us.
Here we go. I know we had a worldwide. I don't want to say pandemic or whatever. We won't get into that politics end of it. But I know me and you were trying to do some things out here, and the world got in the way of that. But
we'll get it done eventually for sure.
So, producer dude, obviously you know nothing about fishing stuff like this. You've watched the Fishhawk in action many times. We actually have put some really good, I think, comprehensive videos that kind of show this A to Z. So if someone was to buy one or maybe is still on the, wanting to see this real time and like what was Ross and Trevor talking about, you can go look at that on our YouTube channel. I know we've put these videos at fishusa.com. They're definitely on Fishhawk Electronics website and social media, but producer dude, like where are we at? Because I guarantee somebody's gonna stop me at the gas station and be like, dude, Fishhawk, like what's up? Like, is there anything else we could do to you've seen it in live and you know what it does, but I feel like sometimes we need to tell them a different way or something.
It's pretty self-explanatory to me from everything we've done, and I know that it measures the speed where your lure's at and not how fast your boat's going. So from a simpleton non-fisherman, measures the speed of your lure, not the speed of your boat.
Right.
It's
set and drift. It's all kinds of fancy things, but you just know, like, you don't even need to really know that. Just
I'm like super guilty of this. So I'm super guilty of, kind of getting tired of telling the same thing over and over again. I mean, you and I have talked about this before, but it's like, it's, we sound like a broken record. I mean, it's because it is a fairly simple story. But the reality is even with all of the, with social, with YouTube, with all the access we have to information right now, not everybody sees that at the same time. So we may put out, you may put out a video and, you get 1,000 views on that video. Okay, well, that's great. And you say, well, I don't want to do that video again because we just did it. 1,000 people watched it. Well, what about the other 100,000 that didn't see it type thing? So I think it's very easy, for us, because we do this every day, to, get tired of telling that story. But again, that's where we try to kind of stay focused on, why do we need it for, what's the value we're providing to people? We want to talk more about the value than we do the product. And then, what we've seen, or, what's worked well for us over the last 12 years has been providing that value. And then, again, we get our fair share of those people as customers.
So besides my website, your website, I know Fish USA, we got some videos on there, and they obviously carry the full line of products with that stuff. And is there anything else where people should check this out, or anything you could reference where? Yeah,
I think between your website, between the fishhawkelectronics.com website, I mean, those are the starting points, keeping it easy. One other place that we've and it's not going to be specific to Fishhawk by any means, but we started a podcast project, our own podcast project a year ago called the Great Lakes Fishing Podcast. And you can rest assured that not every episode is talking solely about Fishhawk, because it really isn't. It's about anything fishing related in the Great Lakes. And unlike your long form, we're like the short form, 20 minutes, easy to digest, not picking on each other, or minimal banter. How is that?
I've been on that multiple times.
And yet it still survives.
And yes, right. I mean, so Ross and banter are like, they go hand in hand. I mean, that's, maybe that's your claim to fame.
I can say I've been on the Great Lakes podcast, I don't know, at least 2, maybe 3 times in the recent past, and there was no banter and no mention of Fishhawk, actually.
That's because that's not me. So, I mean, I'm not personally doing it. So I don't, we let the professionals do that.
You had the marching orders. Yeah. It's simple. It's easy to digest. It's more of one topic. We just kind of rant and go on. We don't really have an agenda here on this one. We've gone down rabbit holes.
Your podcast is like my kids watching other kids play video games. I don't get it, but hey.
Oh, man.
Producer dude, I'm pretty sure that was also an attack on you.
Yeah. What's going on? I've been on your side the whole time.
Whatever. It works. I mean, obviously, people are tuning in and you get the feedback, so that's cool.
Yeah, I mean,
to each their own.
The good thing about us is we don't have anybody. We wanted we had some opportunities to do some sponsorship and different things on it. Obviously, I work with a bunch of companies, like full disclosure, but we just wanted to have this where if I wanted to drop some F-bombs, we just, whatever. I mean, wanted this.
That's a great career goal, by the way. Nice job.
I mean, we wanted whatever. We wanted this to be as authentic as possible. You know what I mean? Where we've talked with guys and we've gotten their behind the scenes stuff. We've had this where we've talked, I think we don't normally talk about products on the podcast. I honestly think this might be the first one, producer dude.
This is the first one.
But it's because this is so unique that it's in its own thing.
I think we're actually coming to like a good place where I think the fishing industry went through this awkward stage of everything is sponsored, this product. And everything was a name drop, this lure, this rod, this reel, this line, whatever. I think like the fishing industry has kind of moved beyond that awkward stage a little bit, where we know that people want information. They want, they want the knowledge that, that's what people are actively looking for. And if you can provide that, then the rest of that stuff comes. But I think we're in a good spot there now where it wasn't, that's been an evolution over the last decade for sure, a couple decades. but I think we're there. So banter away. I guess that's the.
Well, I mean, and I mean, producer dude, I mean, it's like we have a pretty eclectic mix. And I think part of it's just the people. Like we try to have some interesting people on. And some people are banter people, some aren't. Some people have a great story that people want to hear. Other people I think are super interesting. Like we had Leon Hansen on, and certainly not the most amount of views or listens that we've had. But he's one of the guys that kind of helped develop the center pin reel and makes bamboo fly rods. Like if you're into fishing, it's interesting stuff. And to hear how this guy does this and pioneered, but you got to be pretty into fishing to listen to that. Where some other guys, it's just a bunch of hijinks and jackass stuff.
So I thought this was a joke at the time, but I don't know. I was like a 20-something, early 20s when I.
So that was a long time ago.
When I went to work in the as a manufacturer's rep, and when I picked up my first sales manager at the airport, he told me, and I'll never forget it. He actually passed away. I wrote it in his card to his wife here recently. No deal, but anyways, he says to me, he says, you'll be fine if you remember that normal people don't sell fishing tackle. And I thought it was a joke. 20 plus years later, it wasn't a joke. So I mean, and I've never forgotten it. So I don't know where that puts you or me. So.
I fit right into that non-fitting box, right?
Right. So when you talk about eclectic people, that's what triggered that thought was normal. That's what triggered that.
No doubt. Well, thanks for taking the time to join us. Everybody, thank you for listening. Make sure to give us some feedback, hear what you want to hear, what you don't want to hear. I mean, even though what we just said, and Trevor doesn't like the podcast, that's what I took out of it, but it doesn't matter.
I didn't say I didn't like it. I just said, it's, tomato, teach their own.
No, I know. I was just going to put words in your mouth no matter what. But make sure to check us out at Bigwater Fishing. Check us out at Bigwater on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. And as producer guy always reminds me, but usually too late, we're on Stitcher, Google Play,
Apple Podcasts and Spotify.
Yeah, just go to bigwaterfishing.com. If you really can't figure it out, we got all kinds of big pictures and everything on there. So if you don't like reading, we got that. If you like reading, we got that stuff too. We do blogs and all kinds of good stuff. Magazine articles. We got just about everything on there, don't we?
You're a renaissance man.
Fishing stuff.
It's fishing stuff. What is it? It's just stuff with fishing. Yeah. Anyhow, cool. Thanks for giving us your time, Trevor. And I look forward to not only letting these people know what the new stuff coming is, but some of the new projects coming down the pipeline myself.
All right. Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.